it seems to me like I remember you telling, I think it was a C-130 that you saw crash or something. I think it maybe stalled or something happened and it went up like that. And
Oh, at Lockheed, after I left there, a friend of mine was in on that crew. There was a crew on the airplane and a bunch of new guys, the pilots, people I didn't know when I was there. They were new people. And they were had designed a new power boost system for the rudder. C-130 has tremendous big fin and rudder. And it's always had what's called a rudder lock capability. If you get slow enough and put in full rudder, sometimes the rudder won't come back. You push it in, it'll lock hydraulically over there. The cylinder leaks or something. Mm-hmm. And they've never been able to solve that exactly. But anyhow, they in this airplane, I've forgotten what model C-130 this is. Now it's way on up the line. But they had that by now they had bigger, more powerful engines and they need more power on the rudder to compensate for engine out. And they had a new hydraulic system for that airplane, and they were trying it out. And this pilot, and I'm very tempted to say stupid, but I'm sure that's not true. It just seems like that, what he did. But his test was for the very first time on that hydraulic system, was to get on the runway there at Dobbins and go down there and get to V1 and cut that outboard engine where he'd need that rudder and use it and see if he could keep it straight. See if they had enough rudder authority to keep it straight with the one engine out. The worst engine would be the outboard engine. And he was doing that. That was the test. His test card said that. That's what he was doing. But what happened was when he cut that outboard engine, instead of going straight and keeping it straight with rudder and just holding what he had, and he was only at V1, which is below takeoff speed, the airplane nose, I'll say he lifted nose, but I'll just say the airplane nose lifted off the ground at that time, so he lost steering authority to help this going straight, and the airplane lifted up and kept on going up, and because it didn't have enough steering capability then, it turned to the left, turned up like that, rolled 100 just like a wing over, and did a wing over and right behind it and hit by engineering building over here. Just as the report said, straight, absolutely straight down. Had gotten all the way over and straight back down. They were all killed, of course. But that's the only C-130 accident that's ever happened at Lockheed. Mm-hmm. And that was a malfunction somewhere between the pilot and what he was trying to do or did do. I don't know. There's no known reason why he should have done it. They didn't have to lift off at all. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't have lifted off. But it did. And when he lifted off, he shouldn't have kept on going, but it did. Don't have any idea why he did that.
About how many hours do you have on the C-130?
About 2,800.
Wow.
Lockheed gives a 1,000-hour pin for 1,000 hours, and I had 2,000-hour pins and was almost going to get a third one. But that's not a real high time on a 130. This Air Force pilots today, of course, it's been going on so long now, another 30 years, this Air Force pilots with 15,000 hours in C-130s. Hmm. But that was a lot back then with new airplanes.
Yeah. There was an incident that happened once when you were telling me about safety. And we were talking about the philosophy of, I doubt if this conversation could ever be recreated, but it was about safety and things that you do that are a little different, and your philosophy of like there was yes, maybe, and no, and you threw out yes and maybe, or something like that. I don't know if you can even remember. You were telling me about this.
The subject.
And then, as an example, you gave me something that had happened on a C-130 where some circuit breakers were kicking out, and as an example of how you used that philosophy then.
Well, that's two separate things. The yes, no, maybe thing is just a mental approach to emergency situations, and a very good one in my opinion, because it involves judgment. Every pilot has to use his judgment. If he doesn't panic, he can, and he's well trained, he should have good judgment. But he can enhance that judgment by doing that yes, no, maybe thing. If you look at the situation and say, is this definitely okay, or it's definitely not, or is there maybe in between? All you got to do is throw out the definitely not safe and throw out the maybe and say it's definitely not safe and land. Solve the problem. Don't go on. There's so many accidents. In fact, a majority of airplane accidents, if you could find the truth in every pilot's mind prior to the actual accidents, you would find that process going on. Every pilot goes through that every time he has a little problem. And all you got to do is make up your mind to quit. Of course, one of the contraries to that idea is if you're a chicken pilot, you could say that's a no when it really wasn't. So you got to be able to decide where no exists, and that sort of thing. You got to have some capability and skill and lack of panic, but every pilot could use that process to enhance, to help him at the moment when the panic occurs. How do I go about this? Well, yes, no, maybe is one definite way you can do it. I'd rather make a mistake in that and be safe on the ground than to be in the air in an explosion.
So the maybe
Be wrong.
The maybe goes into the no bucket.
Yeah.
And there's only yes and no.
That's right. And it ain't no no's. If it's not a safe situation.
If it's a gray area, you don't know what's unpredictable. Consider that to be a no.
No, there ain't no gray areas. If it's gray area, it's transposed immediately into
no.
It's no, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's a very simple thing. It makes good, safe pilots out of very minimum pilots right away if you just use that theory. And the circuit breaker things are totally different things. Circuit breaker thing was all about circuit breakers and the nature of them and what they're in the airplane for. And the misunderstanding of that by most aviation situations, most people, most things. It's in there to pop the circuit breaker when the electrical load on that wire going through it exceeds a certain value. And it's that certain value is set below the danger point in the unit that circuit breaker is protecting, say a radio or anything, an instrument. It's got a power source over here and it goes through a circuit breaker. If that circuit breaker pops, it's telling you, without any yes, no's, or maybe, it's telling you there's something wrong in that circuit. However, admittedly, it may be that it's the manufacturer of the circuit breaker itself that was made poorly. That's a possibility. Not very likely, but it's possible. And the odds basis is 1 in a million. It could be that, though.
Well, I think you were showing me on this, you were using that as an example in this way, is that you were flying one time and the circuit breaker popped out, and according to the manual, it said you could push it in, I think, twice, and then no more than twice or something like
Once,
that.
always.
And you could have pushed it in, but that was a maybe thing. You put it in the nose, and you didn't push it in. And you got back, and I think they pushed it in, and it caught on fire or something like that. I don't remember what was going on.
Yeah. The mechanic on the airplane met us and asked what the trouble was. We were supposed to go to the building right up our squawks, and inspection would then decide what to do about it and so forth. And this young mechanic asked me what it was, and I told him it was a fuel boost pump circuit breaker popped, and we didn't reset it, and he didn't say anything, just turned around and went back toward the airplane again. We went in the building, he went to the airplane, pushed it in, and the airplane blew up right there on the ramp, burned up.
Hey, did they kill him?
I don't think so, no. He got out of the airplane, but the airplane caught fire in the fuel tank and he got out.
So that was, according to the manual, you could have pushed it once, right?
Well, I don't know for sure. I can't really quote.
Yeah.
That's Lockheed manual you would be talking about now.
Right.
But generally that philosophy was everywhere I went, so I'm sure it would have been.
Yeah.
But flight safety, if you go back to flight safety, which is a safety-oriented organization and set standards for that sort of thing, when I went to flight safety, every checklist they had, every airplane they had said push it in once, and if it pops out again, leave it alone.
Right.
But I said,
But you
no.
said that once was a maybe.
It's not even a maybe to me.
Yeah.
Never was. Just definitely not do it.
Right. It was in the no. You moved it into the no bucket and
Absolutely.
landed it safely.
And eventually I got flight safety to change that
Oh, you
on all their
did?
checklists. After I'd been there for about 5 or 6 years, I talked and talked and talked, and mainly to the students that came through there, and I would tell them about that, and finally it got back around to the headquarters of flight safety that I was bucking the stream there a little bit, and they came and talked with me about it, and we talked and talked and talked, and they finally decided that might be a good idea. So they changed their system. Said don't reset a circuit breaker unless you're absolutely certain you're going to die if you don't do it. In that case, it's okay to do it. But if you think there's any possibility that you can land the airplane like it is, leave it alone. And that would have saved many an airplane. There was a Delta airplane coming out of Atlanta going to Chicago one time, and had a circuit breaker pop on the flush toilet electric motor. And the pilot, the co-pilot, I guess it saw that on his side, and the pilot agreed, let's push it back in one time, see if it stays in, and maybe it was just a temporary malfunction. And so they did, and it popped again. So they said, well, okay, we guess we'll leave it alone. What they didn't know is, when it popped the first time, before it popped, it had started a fire in the lavatory in the back of the airplane. The doors closed, and they didn't know it. Didn't see the smoke or anything. And the fire, well, as far as trace, the accident investigation said they couldn't determine the fire had been there first, but they were sure it had. And so they reset it, and it started the fire again. It had gone out, and it started again. And this time it blazed up and burned up the whole cabin of the airplane, and about half the people died. And in the meantime, after the fire got going, they were just passing one airport when they first had it pop the second time. Something I've forgotten what happened. The detail there in the cockpit. They had decided to go on to the destination, that it was okay, and they passed an airport, and then the fire became obvious, and they were at another airport. And they landed the second one. I've forgotten now. Maybe Paducah, Kentucky, or somewhere up there. I don't know. And landed, and the crew was killed. No, the crew wasn't killed. The passengers, half the passengers, I believe 20-something passengers were killed, and the crew got out of it because they talked to both the crews, and they told them what they did. And the obvious result of that was that if they had left that circuit breaker popped out the first time, they wouldn't have had a problem. And just by resetting it once, you might say specifically, caused that fatalities in that case. Mm-hmm. What they should have done was left it popped out and landed the airplane as soon as possible. And the airplane, there's another part of that theory, is you do something in an airplane, in the air, you can troubleshoot as much as you can. There's a lot of things that checklists, emergency checklists, a lot of them in the air will tell you, try this, try that. Well, it depends. If you're going to die, you might as well try something. But if you're not going to die, you better stop that trying in the air stuff. Get the airplane on the ground, get out, and then decide what would be safe to do, and where you can get around the back and check to see with the meter if that thing's bad or not. You can't do that in the air. And it's just so stupid to do it. People do it all. And there's so many checklists. Have that on there. Try this and try that. It's a mistake. You may abort a few flights you wouldn't have to, but it save accidents. I don't know. They just ain't. No, there ain't two sides to that, in my opinion. I don't see it. I thought about just thinking my lecture on this, and I keep forgetting parts of it. One part of that is, once you think about that thing, one of the arguments comes up. You say, well, we checked with a lot of pilots, and a lot of people have reset circuit breakers and landed okay and found the problem. Everything's okay. So why do that? Half the time it works, or most of the time it works. And I say it probably not most of the time, probably works all the time, because everybody you can ask is here. But there's a bunch of people you can't ask. They're in heaven, and they set a reset circuit breaker, and they're not here. Now, how are you going to check them? Get statistics on that. The only people you can check with are the ones that are successful. So obviously there's an unsatisfactory solution to say that I've done it and it worked. That's not fair at all.
I remember that conversation too, about how the stats are distorted because only the ones that, what they call a near miss or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, what are the stats on near misses? Well, you don't know, because the ones that aren't here, they can't tell you what happened.
That's right. So there's certainly, I think, an open-minded approach to that sort of thing is worthwhile, because a lot of things that we take for granted have not been proven in a positive manner. They've been proven negatively like that, and that's not a good idea at all. So safety first is an awful good subject in aviation.
Yeah, you must have got into this quite a bit when you were teaching those at flight safety and stuff. Were you writing up the stuff? You were actually writing the curriculums and stuff, weren't you? Or adjusting the curriculums and
Yes.
and maybe you even
I found
changed the philosophy of stuff that they were
I
teaching.
got them changed that circuit breaker bit on their checklist, and I think I met with a fairly good amount of favorable response from the students that I had in my class about that sort of thing. And I like to think that's why they like the class, because I got so many recommendations from student reports of classes back through the New York office and back to me and everything, that had to be something that was just, there wasn't anything about the airplane, you know, I just say this is this. I don't know why we like that so much, but I think they liked a lot of those subjects that I just would insert into the class.
Yeah. I seem to remember a story you were telling me one time about, that kind of falls into this category, yes, no, and maybe, and how far you should push testing the plane. You were flying with a guy who was an Arab, and he had a very unusual philosophy about what to do. Do you remember that story?
Yeah. We found that one of the Arab students, we had a bunch of them there, and one of the Arab students didn't show up one day.
Now, what plane is this? What kind is this?
C-130.
Okay.
Now, wait a minute, I'm beginning to mix
I thought it was a
stories.
C-5 Galaxy.
No, it was a C-130, all
Okay.
right. But I was starting to talk about the wrong one. The one you were talking about was the Arab student that we were just flying along, and the fire warning light came on one engine. And he just kept flying, and I saw him turn and look at it right in the center about there, and I'm over there and watching him, and he didn't do a thing, didn't look, just looked at it and looked away. And I sat there a minute, and look, he didn't do anything. The fire warning light, that's something you got to do something about. So I said something to him, said, "Don't you see that fire warning light there?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, aren't you going to do anything about it?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Why not?" He says, "Well, Allah gives and Allah takes. If Allah wants to fix that, He will." And I said, "Well, Allah's not here. You got to do the checklist." And he just didn't want to do that. Somehow that conversation just represented the Arab, Eastern philosophies about that sort of thing. They're very, I can't think of the words now to describe them. They believe in Allah taking care of them about everything they do.
Yeah.
Another story is terrible, in my opinion, but it sort of fits the same thing a little bit. Was one time, what I started to say a minute ago, a student didn't show up for whatever it was, class or whatever it was that day, and they started looking for him and found him in the motel room over by Lockheed there, and he was in bed there, and he had taken a razor blade and cut the sole of his foot, just gone this way and this way all over it. He just had a crisscross the bottom of his feet, and it turned out that that's when their religion, that's a punishment. He's supposed, it's like you see on the TV of people beating themselves with chains. That's the sort of religion that is. And he had decided he hadn't been doing well, and he had to punish himself, and he did. And that sort of religion is a little bit strong for me.
Yeah.